Now that we've created a customer model, the next thing that we need to do is create a pretty way to add customers. And there's a couple things that we need to add to our application to make that happen. The first of those is our customer controller. So just as a review, let's hop back over here to our website, to our site at localhost 1337. And if we go to that site /customer, we can see the list of our customers that's showing up as this JavaScript array right here. So let's pop back over to our application and open Customer Controller. Sails uses the Model View Controller framework for setting up an application. And what that means is that in order to add functionality to our application, we need to add that functionality and explanation of what we want to do inside of our customer controller. And that will control the interface between the view, the display to the user, and the model over in models, API models customer.js that we've created. That in this case, our bare bones model contains name, email, and state. So let's open up Customer Controller. And inside Customer Controller, inside the module.exports object that this controller creates, we're going to add a new function, and we're going to call it, appropriately enough, new. And because new is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, we have to add it in those single quotes there. And we're going to pass a function. This object is going to be a function. That function contains two arguments: the HTTP request, or here we're calling it rec, and the HTTP response that we're here calling res, request and response. And all we need to do inside of new is tell Node and tell Sails to pass this along to the view. So now we need to create a view for customer/new. And you'll do that inside your project directory under views. You'll notice we've got layout, home page, and then some error pages. So we can create a new directory here that we will call customer. This is case sensitive, so make sure you keep that all lowercase. And then inside of customer, we're going to create a new file that we will call new.ejs. EJS is what Sails uses. It stands for Embedded JavaScript. And what this means is a way for us to embed JavaScript inside of our file so that we can very quickly and easily create and merge JavaScript along with our HTML. Now, through the magic of copy and paste, I am going to put some content here inside of our new.ejs file, and then we'll walk through it. So the first thing we want here is a form. And the action for that form is going to be passed to /customer/create, which is starting from the root of our application, pointing to the customer model, or in this case, the customer controller, the create method in there. This form is going to be posted, meaning that the information is going to be passed as variables inside of the object that will pass to our controller. And what do we need to gather? We need to gather text, a text field for name, street. We'll get rid of street address and we'll turn city into email. So we're going to need name, email, and state. And these are from our customer object, name, email, and state. We need variables to pull in each of those bits of information. And then the last thing you need is a submit button. So now we can load this up. And so this is a form. And we will rerun Sails here and open up the form by going to /customer/new in our application. And look at that, we've got our application there. Or we've got our form here with name, and I've already added myself, so I'm going to add my fictional brother Steve. And I'm going to add a state. He lives in Ohio. And create customer. And that passed all of these variables, name, email, state, over to /customer/create, which in this case is a default method provided by Sails to allow you to create objects. And in this case, because it's /customer/create, it knows you want to create a customer object. So the name is Steve Schetzler, email is Stevo, state is Ohio, and if we go back to our customer list at /customer, then now we have me, Baba Joe, and Steve all listed there. So that's fine. We can add things to the database that way. The only issue is that's kind of ugly, and that's not the kind of output that we want our typical users to be seeing. So we need to create a new method inside of our customer controller. So we'll go back to WebStorm. And we're going to create another method inside of customer controller to add things to the database, to add customers to the database and create custom functionality there. So once again, through the magic of copy and paste, I'm going to pull over another function. And now we need to add a comma after the new function in order to tell Node that there's another object coming after that. In this case, it's going to be a create function. This one takes 3 parameters: request, response, and next. And the next is going to be used in case we run into any errors to pass information along. Now what this function uses is another automatically created function created by Sails for all models that is customer.create. And customer.create is going to take all of the parameters that were passed in the HTTP request. So once we have all of those parameters, then we're going to execute this function, passing along potentially an error, if there were any errors in creating the customer in the database, and also the customer object. Now that customer object we'll use down below in just a minute. So if there's an error, we just want to return next to error, and that passes the error along, and then we can view the error page and see all of that information. The next thing that we want to do is redirect the response. So we'll run response.redirect, and we will redirect that response to /customer/show. Now we haven't created customer/show yet, but we will do that in just a moment. And along with that, in addition to /customer/show, we're going to be passing along the ID of that newly created customer. And the ID is how /customer/show will be able to pull that customer from the database to display the information. So here, all we're doing is putting a new customer in the database and then passing information on that customer along to the next form. So now we're going to create customer/show, and we'll delete that last comma. Make sure you've got commas after your new function and after your create function. And we've got a new one here called show. And show, again, takes 3 arguments: request, response, and next. And this one executes another default function provided by Sails. In this case, it's customer.findOne. Customer.findOne uses an ID, which, if you'll notice, we passed along right here. So in that request that show is receiving, which is what is created right here, up above in create, in the request we have a parameter called ID. So we're going to take that parameter, and customer.findOne is going to use that ID to search the database for a customer with that ID. Then it will return that customer object to this function, found customer. It will return potentially an error if there is one, and also a customer object. So the first thing we're going to do, if there's an error, we'll return the next error. We'll pass that along. If there's not a customer, then we'll also pass along and not attempt to do things with the customer like we will if we properly have retrieved a customer from the database. And finally, we're going to run res.view, response.view. And that passes along the control of this application to the view with the same name as our action here. So we have response.view, and that's going to pass then to the customer, because we're in the customer controller, /show.ejs view. Inside of that view, we're going to be passing a customer, the customer that we just retrieved from the database. So create, just as a review, create puts a customer into the database, passes control to the show. The show pulls that customer from the database, pulling all of the information about that customer, and passes that to views/customer/show.ejs. So the last thing we're going to need to do to make this work is create a new file called show.ejs in our customer object. And now that we have show.ejs, the very last thing, again through the magic of copy and paste, I'm going to pull over our new page. And our new page here that we're going to put in show.ejs contains a header that contains the customer name. So this syntax right here you may or may not be familiar with. The less than %equals tells Node to run some JavaScript that's held inside this sign and before the next % and greater than sign. And the equals here tells it to escape any HTML so that we don't have any vulnerabilities from people maybe entering their name as a JavaScript command that would then be run right here. So this tells us to escape that, providing just a little bit of security. So this pulls in that customer object that was passed right here in the customer controller. In show, we passed our customer object. Show.ejs has that customer object and can run customer.name, which will have the name of our customer. And we'll put that in a header tag. And then we'll have their email address and put that in another header tag with the same syntax right here. And then finally, customer.state to include the customer's state. So now that we have name, state, and email, we're just going to stop and rerun Sails and see our new form in action. So we'll open up our browser here and we'll go to customer/new. Remember, that's our customer creation form, and we'll create another fictional person here, loco amigo, and with an email address of loco@example.com. He lives in North Dakota. Create a customer, and notice instead of the ugly JSON that was created before that we saw, we're now redirected to our pretty show page with the name in that H1 tag, email and their email address, and then state on the last line. And now, as always, the very last thing that we need to do is commit all our changes. So we are going to add customer creation and display. Commit to master and sync.